The Connecticut Sun went to New York and got what they came for. Jacqueline LeBlanc, our excellent Sun reporter, is here to talk about it. Locked on Women's Basketball starts now.
Ogunbowale for the win. Good!
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm your host, Howard Megdal. I want to thank you for making us your first listen every day. Make sure you are subscribing on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get 6 days a week of women's basketball podcasting goodness. And of course, it is not just from me. It's from the incredible team across thenexthoops.com, where we have over 100 reported pieces every month. You can subscribe $9 a month, $72 a year. Just sign up for the free site. Make sure you start getting our emails and see what we are all about at thenexthoops.com. And what we are about these days, among other things, is the WNBA playoffs, a fascinating series going on. Connecticut, New York. In segment one, we're going to talk about what's happened with Jacqueline LeBlanc, the Connecticut Sun beat reporter. Segment two, we're going to talk about what needs to happen. The series is tied 1-1, going back to Connecticut. We're at Mohegan Sun, Friday night game 3, Sunday afternoon game 4. Going to be a fascinating weekend in a state that, and Jacqueline, you can speak to this. There's been some women's basketball moments in the state before, right? I'm not misremembering.
Oh, yeah. So in the southeastern Connecticut part, where Uncasville is, quite a bit of basketball there. But I hear, about 45 minutes north, I think they also play basketball there. But I haven't been, so I wouldn't know.
Quinnipiac are you talking about?
Oh, yeah, they're pretty good, I hear.
They are. Shout out Trisha Fabry. And, the people in stores, too, I hear, have a little team that's done some things. But so have the Sun. And I just want to start here where I had the chance to talk to Alyssa Thomas, who was an absolutely worthy MVP candidate. I do feel sadness about the amount of anger there is around this, and the fact that there is, let us say, instead of a positive feeling over the fact that 3 generational players in the WNBA all had their best seasons the same season. And I think not just unprecedented for the history of the WNBA, but I don't happen to believe this is just where the league is now. I think this is rare. We may not see this again moving forward for a while, but Alyssa Thomas, clearly one of those players, and willed her team. And this is my favorite stat out of all of it. She led her team to a game 1 victory on the road. They've done that 4 years in a row. Now, Alyssa Thomas, when I asked her about it, said, well, this is what it's all about. And just that it's just a matter of course for being AT. But what do you see? What allows the Sun, and you've covered them for me for a while now, what allows them to be so good in that specific environment? Game 1 on the road.
I think, it's just having a sense of urgency. And like you said, it's kind of the standard here. They've been to the semis the last 5 years in a row. I actually had a really interesting conversation with Natisha Heidemann last week at practice. And a stat that was really interesting to me is that at the time, after game 1 of their first series against the Lynx, Natisha moved into 3rd all time in Connecticut Sun playoff games played, which makes a lot of sense when she was a rookie on that 2019 team that went to, 5 games in the finals, and she's been in the semis every year of her career since then. And she talked a lot about how, that's just the standard here. It's the standard they hold everyone to, everyone in that locker room, ranging from vets to people who, are just on this team this year, to Natisha, who is, still young in her W career, but has been here for a really long time, has a lot of institutional knowledge about the team. They all hold each other to the same standard. And, I think with this series in particular, there was a lot of talk about, being being down 0-4 in the regular season and then having to play a game on the road. Also a lot of talk about how this kind of mirrors the last Sun season in 2022, even though, the teams are completely different, staffs are different and whatnot. The Sun also lost 4 games in the regular season to the Chicago Sky. That it also extended back to 2021 before that. So I think they had lost like 7 in a row to Chicago, and they eventually were able to beat them in 5 in the semifinals when it really mattered. So I think that's the thing about this team. They're led by a lot of really good veterans. I wrote the other day that DeWanna Bonner is, pretty soon going to be the most experienced postseason player ever in league history. She's basically already almost there. She knows how to win. They brought her in here for this moment, and Alyssa Thomas, Tiffany Hayes, they've all been here before. So I think it's a really high standard in that locker room. They talk all year about having a sense of urgency, having discipline, and being able to respond and adjust in the moment. And those game ones are really important to doing that for them.
It is interesting. DeWanna Bonner is now nearing the end of a contract that at the time, the conventional wisdom was, well, given her age, is it reasonable to expect a max level player by the end of that contract? And clearly she is. And clearly she is in this series. There is a certain delight in watching the game that she has on a regular basis, just what she brings, how she's able to craft her way to the basket, find those shots, unafraid to stretch the defense by not just taking threes, but taking 28 footers and making them on a regular basis. I guess the thing I wonder about DeWanna Bonner is, without DeWanna Bonner, we talked a lot about how AT is irreplaceable. DeWanna Bonner's irreplaceable too. They have all these kind of irregular pieces that you're able to fit into what the Sun are doing. And it's a huge credit to Steph White, to me, coach of the year, even if not for Bree Jones going down, but being able to just reconfigure. Part of that is obviously her success as a coach. Part of it is just these pieces that are able to do so many different things.
The Sun are so versatile. And I think that's been, their strength for a long time, but also their strength this year. And just, the amount of changes that they've had to go through all season, starting in training camp with a new staff, a new system, new players and new teammates, to, adjusting, a month into the season. DeWanna Bonner, a 6'4" player, perimeter player, is moved to the 4, sometimes the 5. So I've been really impressed by DeWanna being able to move out of position, just for the rest of the season, basically. After Bree went down in June, Alyssa did the same thing. I think we talk about Alyssa's versatility a lot. When, you have a 6'2" player like Alyssa Thomas who does everything that she does. But, in that, I think sometimes we also overlook how versatile DeWanna Bonner is. She's a perimeter player, but I've been really impressed with how she's picked up her rebounding, especially in the postseason. Like, that's something this team needs to get over the hump and to get back to the finals and beat New York. DeWanna's been really good at rebounding. Her 3-point shooting hasn't been super efficient, but she's there for the big moments, the big buckets. DB says all the time, she's not going to stop shooting. And the Sun don't need her to stop shooting. They need her to be aggressive. And when she's aggressive, I think that's also when she's at her best. So Steph's done a really good job with DB this year. I think DB has also talked about how she's also had a lot of fun playing in this offense, and it kind of speaks to her strengths as well. And just how she's been able to move out of position, DeWanna, guarding the people she's been guarding in the paint when she's a 6'4", 140-something pound perimeter player. I think that's been really impressive.
It's really impressive. And again, I'm watching last night and watching DeWanna Bonner guarding Jonquel Jones, which is hard for anyone. But if you just go by listed weight, there is a difference of 72 pounds between the 6'6", 215 JJ and the 6'4", 143-pound DeWanna Bonner. And yet she is battling there. She is finding ways. She's fronting at times. Just a lot of different things to try and limit the offensive rebounds. And this was a point of emphasis. It was in a story I wrote. You can see over at thenexthoops.com right now. But Steph White talked about offensive rebounds, and limiting those offensive rebounds was so important. They limited them to 12 in the first game. They limited the Liberty to 8 in the second game. It really was striking. Now, Steph, is always seeking better and was talking about the need to not just affect the total number, but the timeliness of it when they get those boards. And there were some key moments when it happened, but DB is a big part of that. So it's remarkable to see. I do want to make sure we're talking about Tip Hayes. We're going to talk, obviously, about Alyssa Thomas in segment 2. But first, I want to talk to you guys at home about Jace Medical as the sponsor of today's show. And Jace Medical, they have something called the Jace Case. Let me tell you about it. You order the Jace Case. It provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. There's no shortage of times where you have had a medical issue come up, and maybe your doctor's office is closed that day. Maybe it's the weekend. Maybe it's a holiday. Maybe your doctor's just on vacation. But all it takes to get a Jace Case is you fill out a simple online form. Sometimes you jump on a quick call with one of their board-certified physicians. And again, this is doctor-created, doctor recommended. You can get ongoing care from your physicians, any treatment-related questions right there using the Jace Case. Now, already, that's going to save you on average about $360, right? But you can save an extra $20 by using the code locked on at checkout at jacemedical.com. So again, go to JASEMEDICAL.com, use the code LOCKEDON at checkout, and you get $20 off at jacemedical.com. So speaking of what the doctor ordered, it's hard to say that there was a better prescription, note the segue, than getting 30 points out of Tiffany Hayes last night in a game that, quite frankly, the Sun came very close to winning and coming back home, if you can imagine, with a 2-0 lead. Now, Alyssa Thomas, when I spoke to her after the game, talked about, look, we came here to do what we set out to do, which is get a split and come back in a position to clinch in front of our home fans. DB already was talking in the post game, say, we're coming home, show up, looking for the Mohegan crowd to be similar to what New York brought at Barclays Center. It was a magical experience in both of those. But I want to take you all back for a moment, and Jacqueline and I were talking about this off the air, right? I'm going to take you back to the year 2016, okay? It is the playoffs. It is, in fact, September 25th, 2016. The Atlanta Dream are playing against the Chicago Sky. Chicago Sky start Imani Medee-Stafford, Courtney Vandersloot, Cappie Pondexter had 16 points. Jessica Breland scored 20 and had 16 rebounds. Miscovering Jessica Breland. What a great player she was. The Atlanta Dream had Angel McCautry, Elizabeth Williams, Lasia Clarendon, Bria Holmes, and their 5th starter that night, who played the most minutes of anyone other than Elizabeth Williams, Tiffany Hayes. 30 points, 6 rebounds. Tiffany Hayes, just at a different era in WNBA history, was vital. Just as last night, fighting through a knee injury was absolutely vital. The Sun got her in a trade for a draft pick, turned into Haley Jones. Haley Jones, talented young player. But the Sun aren't anywhere close to where they are without Tiffany Hayes, right?
Yeah. So, Tiffany Hayes scored 30 points last night. And like you said, that's exactly what they needed. I want to shout out my friend Kayla, who covers the Sun for the Lead, real quick, because we had a conversation during last year's playoffs when we were probably watching the finals. And at one point, Kayla said to me that, who would be really good on this team as a guard is Tiffany Hayes. And we joke about how she kind of manifested that. But it is what they need.
I am a big fan of Kayla myself, may I just say. That comes as no surprise to me that she was on it.
Yeah, and that's what this team desperately needed in last year's postseason is a guard who's not afraid to go to the basket herself, who's able to shoot from everywhere, also defend, and they found that perfect match in Tiffany Hayes, and she really delivered for them last night. Steph White said after, the first game in the presser that, we'll go as far as our guards take us. And that's kind of been the case for this team all season. Tiffany Hayes has, kind of been up and down throughout the season, but she has been, a big scoring threat. And, when the team has needed her, she's been able to deliver. And that's exactly what, the Sun needed last night. I love how I think it was Alyssa who said that last night, that Liberty had to switch to a zone because they can't guard Tiffany Hayes. They don't have the answer for Tiffany Hayes.
I asked her, I said, what did you learn about Tip Hayes in this series? That they can't guard her, that they have no answer for her. I mean, she was quite blunt about it in a way that I would be surprised if that doesn't end up on a bulletin board somewhere in the road side of Mohegan Sun before Friday.
Right. And, it really happened. And, Stephanie has said all season, that she doesn't think there's a better guard who can get downhill other than Tiffany Hayes. And, watching her do that in person, I might agree with her. Tiffany is super, super fast. And, especially in transition, I think she just fits into this system really, really well. And, they're going to need more big games from Tiffany. And, I think I also wanted to shout out Beck Allen real quick from game one, who was our game one guard star. She scored, 18 points on 4 of 6 from 3. She also had 7 rebounds.
9 total shots. I mean,
yeah.
Crazy efficiency.
Really, really efficient. So, something I'm watching is that Rebecca Allen and Tiffany Hayes both came in, this postseason via trade as a result of the Jonquel Jones trade, who they're now playing with the Liberty. And yeah, I think if the guards take them far and that's what Stephanie wants to see from them, I think it'll be a really good series. Another area where she really wants the guards to kind of step up is rebounding. So I think we saw a lot of that in the first game. Tiffany herself has been a really good rebounder in other games this postseason and in other games throughout the season. So not saying that 30 points is not doing enough, because it certainly is. But, I think if, the guards together, crash the boards a little bit better, they're in it. And I think Tiffany's really important to that. And, we'll see where their guards take them, as Steph White said.
She also doesn't make a lot of mistakes. Just had a couple of turnovers last night, despite all the attention. Her turnover percentage regularly is, below 13 and is often even below that throughout her career. It just seems like, I hesitate to break out the hashtag disrespect again, but you just go back to the gap between what so many of these players have accomplished and the way in which they're kind of part of the conversation. If you go by win shares, which is an imperfect stat, but it's a catch-all stat that kind of gives you a sense of value, DeWanna Bonner, all time in the history of this league, is 13th. There are only 12 players in the history of the WNBA with more win shares. DeWanna Bonner has more career win shares than Cheryl Swoops or Maya Moore or Elena Deladon or Penny Taylor or Brianna Stewart or Becky Hammond or Tina Charles. Now, again, there's differences in the amount of games they've played and so on and so forth, but that matters too, right? How long you're able to succeed at the level that she has done it. But Tip Hayes is 44th in the entire history of the league. Tiffany Hayes, and again, not just all the things you talked about, but the way she just throws her body into harm's way. She is fearless. It is an incredible thing to see. And so finding her in this moment, being able to do it, seeing Rebecca Allen finally getting that regular role and running with it, of course, you just go up and down this lineup. There's no one, and maybe this goes back to what we were talking about with AT, and we're going to get to a little bit of this with segment 3, but AT feels like she is constantly getting snubbed, which has to be an awful feeling, right? And certainly Alyssa Thomas, one of the greats of this generation. Alyssa Thomas is a Hall of Famer, and she's whether we're talking Knoxville or we're talking Springfield, Alyssa Thomas is a Hall of Famer. Let's just get that very clear, regardless of what order you had the MVP race in. All 3 of them are, and Alyssa Thomas is absolutely there. But the way in which this team, and Tiffany Hayes was emotional last night. DeWanna Bonner is AT's fiance. So fine, she's emotional about that. Fine. Tip Hayes was too last night, talking about how they were playing for AT. This team has a lot in common when it comes to emotional makeup, and Darius Taylor should be credited not just for figuring out the right pieces to give to Stephanie White to operate as a head coach, but as a GM to put together a team that has that ethos. So we're going to talk about this in just a second because it does relate directly to AT and to what they need out of this weekend. But first, when we think about Alyssa Thomas and her legacy in Connecticut, and you know this well, the Sun as a franchise have done basically everything except win a WNBA title, right? It's just sitting there. It was the thing, frankly, was sitting on Mike Tebow's resume as the one missing thing before he went to Washington and managed to win over the Sun in a game the Sun led in the third quarter in Game 5 in DC. I remember that to this day as the closest that this Sun team has come. If this Sun team can win these two games in Mohegan, is that the most significant accomplishment by this franchise yet?
That's a good question. I don't know about that. You know, they've been to the semis, they've been to the finals before, you know, they've been over the hump. I think if you would ask them, it's all about, you know, getting over the actual championship hump and nothing else really matters. I think beating the Liberty and, you know, kind of closing it out at home would be huge for their confidence. You know, no one expected them to be at this point, you know, probably not a lot of people expected them to split 1-1 at Barclays before even having the chance of having two games to clinch at home. So like we, you know, not to compare it to last year, but like what we talked about earlier, you know, the Sun were also in this opportunity in this same position when they played Chicago in the semis. They took the first game in Chicago. Chicago evened it up before they went to Mohegan. And I think the Chicago Sky ended up winning both of those games at Mohegan Sun they split and then they had to go back. So yeah, you know, kind of a big change here. They do have an opportunity. I think they realize how big that opportunity is. I think they realize they don't want to have to go back to New York, which could probably not be too kind to them. Not that they haven't played in elimination games on the road before. Right. But yeah, you know, I think it might be huge to their confidence boost. I think it would be really big for this team, you know, especially as a collective unit. They've talked a lot over the season of how this group is really close. You know, they were really close when Bree went down and kind of, you know, championing together to play for Bree. And now it's kind of the same thing where they're championing together to play for AT and to show her, you know, how much she has meant to them as teammates and as their leader. And, you know, Alyssa, you know, she's as humble as she comes, doesn't have much to say when you ask her about, you know, all these various awards. You know, when I think it was interesting that she said, you know, she's been snubbed a lot in her career. I think that also extends outside of the WNBA, you know, possibly in EuroLeague Final Fours, you know, on the world stage and FIBA, you know, whatnot. So she's talked about how she's used to that before. But, you know, I think what she'll always say is, you know, the one piece of hardware that she really, really cares about is getting that championship, and nothing else really matters to her. So, you know, if they're able to close out these two games at Mohegan Sun Arena and have that opportunity, you know, to get through this first super team, you know, assumedly waiting another one in the finals as a final rematch, I think that would be huge for the team as a group. And I think that would really kind of set, you know, momentum going for them into the finals.
It hurt my heart to hear her say that last night and the way she said it. It's somebody who is as accomplished as Alyssa Thomas to feel that way. And you say off the court, but I even think the idea that she's not a spokesperson for various companies, the idea that you wouldn't be honored to have Alyssa Thomas as a spokesperson for your company. It's another conversation, I guess, for another time, but it's something that was hard to see up close, just as a human, and that she feels that way. And again, like you said, there's an urgency, but there's also not a sense that they can't come through if they simply split. I remember being in the room with you after that game 4 in Connecticut last year in the semifinals. And for those who may not remember, they were down 2-1 to the Chicago Sky, to the defending champs. Game 4 comes in, and not only do the Sun win, but they don't even win by playing their typical game. They went out there and crushed the Sky 104-80, and then go back to Chicago and silence the Wintrust Arena home crowd. So anyone who thinks they can predict, this game generally, but very specifically the Connecticut Sun, I think was making an enormous mistake. And I can't wait to see what happens. It's going to be some amazing basketball. If you're anywhere close to Mohegan Sun Arena, I would get there if I were you, because you're going to see something, the likes of which you never saw before. That's just how the Connecticut Sun roll. Jacqueline LeBlanc will be there. I will be there as well. The great Jackie Powell will be there, holding down all things New York Liberty on the other side of that as well. And we're really looking forward to what we have ahead. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. We're going to have, of course, further coverage. We're going to ramp up our college coverage, because guess what? Right around the corner, NCAA women's basketball season is here. There is no off season in women's basketball. Until tomorrow, I am Howard Megdal, wishing all of you a wonderful Wednesday.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.